This video is brought to you by Sai Nijima, aka Lawyer Sister, aka my wife.
Who put you in charge? God did, when he killed my wife.
Hello! Wow! Fun fact, I'm reviewing this disgusting episode today because I stuck the South Park catalog into a random number generator and this is the choice that popped out. Woo! It's 3 in the morning and I'm reviewing a story all about lice. Ugh, I've officially lost control of my life. However, I didn't go for a cheeky do-over on the generator because I realized that I have no idea, no clue how the South Park community feels about this episode, which is quite rare as I try to be somewhat aware of general attitudes about the stuff I review. I imagine there's likely a group of folks who passionately hate how this thing shoves aside Cartman and co. in favor of boring-ass Clyde of all people, and a bunch of gross bugs living through a real cliched like disaster movie setup, but there's probably also a ton of other people who appreciate South Park going this balls to the wall, as doing a Madhouse zoom-in on something as mundane as lice isn't something you see on a daily basis, or even in other crazy shows. Well, okay, that said, this kind of nutty thing would be perfectly par for the course, a regular day for Miss Frizzle and her magic sentient school bus. And if you don't think the Frizz of all people would relish showing a bunch of melting lice to a group of horrified school children, then you don't know dick about what that show used to do to those poor kids.
Ectoplasm! Did you see the ghost? It ran through here, it slimed me!
You son of a bitch!
Oh, that wasn't me, that was a spooky ghost!
Becoming an egg? Okay. Getting fertilized? Okay.
But now the question becomes, why are we bothering to think about lice of all things? Why do we care? And why are we getting Clyde as our POV character for this issue? Will somebody please explain this to me? Ugh. Well, here's the thing. The dirty little secret about South Park is that it often finds itself wanting to take breaks, big breaks sometimes, from paying attention to just like Stan, Kenny, Cartman, and Kyle. Those 4 characters don't fit neatly into every imaginable scenario, so South Park will sometimes shove them in a dirty closet for a time, a la The Substance, best movie of all time by the way. Mwah! Ooh, loved every second of it. More. Ooh, it will do this to focus on similarly important people like Randy Butters, Mr. Garrison, or Oprah Winfrey's anus. I understand that some of the other faces will overstay their welcome, and at times it does leave us wondering where the boys even went, but I would much rather have the series disregard them entirely than drag them around to do basically everything and just stand around and idly comment on what's going on around them instead of being active participants in the plot. If they don't have anything to do, then get them out of here, or if they're going to like hamper the story that you want to tell and they don't need to be there, then you don't like have to like jam them in or like just shove them in and say, hey, remember Stan? Oh my god, he's one of the main characters. You love him, right? Oh, look at him. Blah, blah, blah. As upsetting as this may be for some people to hear, Stan and Kyle simply aren't interesting enough on their own to be consistent spearheads of episodes, since they're framed as being generally normal or common sense kind of people, so roping them into every single conflict would have had them like dragging their feet and complaining when things got too weird, which is a trick that can't be relied on to work more than just like once or twice. When they can actually break out of being gloomy Gusses, the pair does work best when they're able to buy into the madness of the problem and get emotionally invested in the stakes, but even then they're usually just reacting to something that a crazier person than them is doing or wanting them to do. This is why Cartman and Butters are able to be such consistently good leading characters, because they tend to cause actions to happen instead of being led by the nose into trouble, which admittedly can be fun if done right, although it is not easy to do consistently. Them just wanting to play Okama Game Sphere in the Tally debut is a great example of this, because the episode was very intentionally making a dumb situation that they wanted no part of, but doing that too many times with these central characters would get repetitive, so it does make sense that the series would be interested in looking at characters like Clyde to see if they also have narrative potential. I actually think that's a very powerful sign of being a great storyteller when the writers do feel confident enough in leaving fan favorites behind and trying to explore undiscovered areas of conflict. For a comparison, as much as I do love Steven Universe, that show sometimes feels like nobody is able to do anything meaningful or think for themselves unless Steven is observing or participating in what's going on. Contrast that against something like Hunter x Hunter, which will selectively only use a few of the main characters at a time and will even entirely dismiss people like Leorio and Kurapika Rebecca and Hisoka for huge spans of the story, just because they would be critically out of place in certain arcs, but their absence does have the very beneficial trade-off of allowing other minor characters to step up, fill their space, and serve that portion of the plot better than they would. I mean, hell, Adventure Time will have entire storylines develop without Finn or Jake needing to be there, and that really helps make the surrounding world feel authentically alive, because none of us are actually the main characters in the grand scheme of things. As Shakespeare himself once wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances." This method of exploratory storytelling, where you put your main crew aside and try to discover if anybody else has potential, is so critical to South Park's development and growth, because if your series is going on for literal decades, you risk burning out your audience and yourself as a creator if your stories have to stay shackled to one small set of characters. So by widening the camera a little bit and looking in different places, you can usually surprise yourself by finding an interesting person that you may not have expected to be all that compelling. And yes, you do risk failure by spending too much time on a loser character that the fans will hate, but the upsides of finding someone fresh and new is too exciting to wholly ignore. Butters is the ultimate poster boy for the massive benefits this method can provide, where his role as a punching bag guy was initially filled by Pip, but when they realized that Pip just wasn't working out how he should and they couldn't really do anything new and exciting with him, they gave him the boot and bestowed his mantle onto Butters, and with great success.
Butters!
Whoa! Hey, Dad!
Butters, what are you doing?
I'm getting a surprise!
I do want to go on record, though, by saying that I don't outright hate Pip as a person, but I do think that he sucked as a part of this show in particular, as he was a very weak joke that really needed to be retooled if it was going to have any sort of longevity moving forward. We saw the same thing happen with Miss Chokes on Micropenises, Dr. Mephisto, Big Gay Al, and Chef's parents, all of whom had their time to shine, but needed to be put in a bag and thrown off a tall building into a vat of acid before their lagging presence dragged the whole show down. I bring all this up into our discussion because the Lice episode tries to make a similar experiment with Clyde, where he gets a majority of the screen time instead of any of the other students who we already know would be fun to watch head this kind of story, but Clyde gets a chance to shine because he has remained something of an unknown personage up until this point. This really does feel like his big chance at impressing us to cement his place in the show as a reliable side character that we can count on, the way that Token and Craig already did in their Spotlight stories. We were able to connect with Token because his efforts at bringing in more rich kids to South Park was deeply personal to his feelings of alienation and wasn't something that any of the other kids would think to do, and of course him making the bold choice to go live with lions was notable enough to stick in our memory so we can go, oh yeah, I remember that really good Token episode, that was pretty fun. Hell, even Craig would eventually demonstrate his comedic potential by attempting to dislodge himself from the very silly guinea pig call to adventure, going against the grain in such a flat manner that it contrasted beautifully with how bonkers that situation was and how the other boys really wanted to engage with the problem.
Craig, it isn't our fault. You make it sound like we always want to be in situations like this, but we don't have any choice.
Yeah, stuff just happens.
Stuff just happens. You just wind up being sent by the government to take down the city of Lima, only to wind up in Land of the Giants Lost World. That's right.
And that's all wonderful stuff, big hugs, kisses, and warm cookies for them, but unfortunately Clyde doesn't get anything like that in this episode, not even close. All that really happens is he gets his lice diagnosis, becomes embarrassed and afraid that everyone else will find out the truth, oh no, and that's really it. There's nothing going on with him that your average kid couldn't also do. Well, okay, to be fair, he does have this one very funny little exchange.
I have an ear infection. What are you seeing the doctor for?
I have AIDS.
AIDS!
Nice. Perhaps if they'd leaned more into that kind of stuff, where he keeps coming up with crazier and crazier excuses and methods of hiding his condition as time goes on, then we would have gotten a firmer idea of how far he's willing to go to save face. That strategy has already been proven to work wonderfully with the Randy and Stan like supposed future self episode, where Randy was fully committed to the bit and went to the most extreme lengths possible to maintain the lie and keep Stan from doing drugs, even if it meant he had to disfigure an actor along the way.
Ah! What, his hand did disappear! He is you from the future! Oh, Jesus Christ, help me!
Yeah, that's awesome. We needed that level of crazy with Clyde, a demonstration of where his limits, or lack of limits, are. But no, all we really get out of him is just being like, oh, generally nervous and calling Mrs. Garrison when the other kids start getting out of control. Oh my goodness. Ugh, wow, you're almost reaching the levels of like Randall from the greatest show of all time, Recess. Huh. Watch out there, Clyde, buddy. You're about to get dog walked in the cool department by Urkel if you aren't careful. I actually think the main problem here is that Clyde's role in the story is that he's intentionally made to have like a boring bog standard experience, as it's revealed that all the other kids have lice as well, meaning that Clyde's reaction is literally just a smaller variation of what everyone else is going through. That factor actually does give the episode a very fun sense of rewatchability, as we get to see how each of the kids are behaving when they think that they're the only one with the lice problem. This also means that Cartman's analysis of their behavior is surprisingly spot on.
This is exactly what you would do if you had had head lice. Try to get everyone to blame me. And this is exactly what Kenny would do. Stand here and say nothing.
Hey guys, what would I do?
And now we come to arguably the most enjoyable portion of the episode, the Thing parody, which is very fitting for an episode all about paranoia. I vehemently wish they had sunk their teeth into this parody a bit deeper, or hell, just go whole hog and make the entire episode about being trapped in Cartman's basement as they try to figure out who's the infected one. That type of claustrophobic paranoia worked brilliantly in the first Man-Bear-Pig story, where Cartman swallowed all that fake treasure when they got trapped in the cave system. Watching Cartman get progressively more deranged demonstrates that the show does know how to write people going slowly crazy while trapped in dire circumstances, so I feel that they should have spread that love around a little bit more here in this story, instead providing us with a series of smaller POV segments of the boys being unable to leave until the lice head threat was revealed, and we could have seen each of how they're sort of reacting to this set of circumstances. And besides, if the X-Files can do an entire shameless ripoff of The Thing with its first season episode titled Ice, then why should South Park be afraid of doing the same thing if the situation feels ripe for a parody? I mean, being stuck in such close quarters would have certainly given some of these side characters more of a chance to shine brighter, providing Matt and Trey themselves with plenty of opportunities to lean into crafting amusing dialogue in much the same way that The Thing did.
You believe any of this voodoo bullshit, Blair? I just cannot believe any of this voodoo bullshit.
Oh my god, I adore how silly that statement is. God bless Keith David for delivering such a weirdo line with a straight face. Like, the whole problem has already been proven to be an alien at that point, so calling it like voodoo bullshit is hilarious. Oh, what a perfectly John Carpenter line that is. Oof. However, while the setup itself is very fun, I'm not really a big fan of how Kyle just straight up calls out Cartman for using the Thing's blood test and how it technically doesn't prove anything.
You didn't come up with that experiment, Cartman. You saw it in that movie, The Thing.
This is a scientific test designed to...
You saw it in The Thing, and you're wasting everyone's time.
Like, I understand that it's supposed to reveal how obviously fake this test is, and that Kyle is only really doing this so Cartman can't just blame the whole thing on him, but I don't know what to tell you, man. It's just making me wish they dropped the whole, like, oh, I know that you know crap, and had just gone for this whole parody more earnestly. We didn't need someone to just straight up look at the camera and say, hey, we're doing a Pet Cemetery story, you get it? This is just like what happened in that movie that's inspired by the book Pet Cemetery, you get it? Sometimes dead is better, wouldn't you say so, Mr. Stotch? Whoa, wow, cool. No, we just need them to drop the fake Butters body off the building, have the Judd Crandall guy tell them what to do, and then leave the Stotches to twist in the wind. That's fine. You don't need to show us how smart you are by being so blunt and revealing your inspiration. We get it. We know what you're doing. That said, it is very funny how Cartman chooses to make Kenny his personal scapegoat, and how the formerly protesting Kyle goes along with the results without another word of protest. Hey, what's going on, Kyle? I thought this whole thing was voodoo bullshit. What happened? It's almost as if Kyle is glad that someone else is taking the blame.
Wash Kenny with the soap and dry him off with the sauce. No, not the sauce. Wait.
Oh my god, they washed Kenny, you foam-fingered bastards. Thank goodness Mrs. Garrison comes in and drops an epic truth bomb on them, the same way that the United States recently dropped tomahawks on Iranian schoolchildren.
Dude, that is not cool. You're gonna get us into trouble again.
And speaking of horrific forever war-inciting incidents, I think it's time we finally address the elephant in the room and talk about the main attraction of this episode, the massacre of Clyde's lice. The anthropomorphic atrocity is framed as a classic disaster movie tale, one where the hubris huffing humanoids think they're... and that harming the planet won't come with severe consequences. This isn't quite a direct movie reference to anything specific, as they would do with Randy and the Day After Tomorrow movie, but more of a generalized format which works very well here. The Lice and their babies have simply pushed things too far, consumed too many resources, and have even started naming their children in the same way that suburban wine moms do.
I was just thinking about our baby. I want to name her Hope.
Hope?
Hope for a chance at tomorrow.
Oh yeah, these malformed mites had to go before they started making Live, Laugh, Love merch or coffee mugs that say shit like, oh, behind every great mom is a great cup of coffee, which sounds more like something you should put on your enema machine. Also, something I think hurting the watchability of these events is how messy the Lice character designs are. Their bodies are just much too fleshy and over-detailed, where your eyes just sort of like glance over them without really taking anything in. The more buffed up tan ones at the end of the story are much cleaner and visually distinct, which probably should have been the default look for the normal ones. I get that they needed to show that the Viltrumite lice were like more advanced and stronger variants, but the baseline lice definitely lacks all of the sauce that they have, much to the detriment of the story. Oh, and before we get to that scene, the big one that elevates this whole thing to a crazy level, I do want to shout out Clyde's doctor for a minute. Am I the only one who gets the distinct impression that he knows that the lice are somewhat sentient, or that the prescribed shampoo is going to do something horrible to them, as he appears to relish in the thought of them being taken out?
Your scalp may burn a bit afterwards, but it should kill every last one of them.
That's amazing. Now there's a guy with a backstory to tell. That's some very good characterization for such a small role. If you had told me that this guy looked under a microscope and watched the lice's reaction to the shampoo with a dark smirk of sick pleasure on his face, I would believe you. And this, finally, brings us to the great cleansing, where the lice encounter, well, their end. Oh my god. Oh manatee. Whatever quibbles I may have about the Clyde stuff or the missed opportunity with the thing, the lice melting when they come into contact with the shampoo literally makes up for everything. That scene is so beautifully visceral, so full of pain and confusion from the frantic population, where you're being faced with this like encroaching barrier of death, a ceaselessly approaching line where if you cross it, or if it crosses you, then you are well and truly screwed. I imagine even watching people get overtaken by lava wouldn't be this bad, as at least they would like burst into flames or be obscured by smoke. This is pure acid eating away at their skin with hellish effectiveness. It all kind of reminds me of that one horrifying segment from Creepshow 2, The Raft, where a group of sexy teenagers encounter an acid lake monster thing, whatever the fuck it is, one that starts eating and melting them. Oh, it's so awful. This whole story is that, except if the monster was big enough to sweep over the landscape, which is such a like instinctively awful thing to consider. While I did complain about how fleshy the lice's bodies are, it is that familiar skin quality that makes this whole melting thing feel so distressing, as it somewhat resembles like naked people being turned into shambling corpses. And of course, I do have to mention that overhead shot, the perfect overhead shot, where we see a few of them like fusing together, and that poor lice mother desperately trying to hold her child above the pool of death, which is a truly dismaying sight and really sticks with you. But afterwards though, with like Clyde using the hairdresser to blow them all away, I don't know, it's okay, but it's nothing could ever reach the peak horror of all that melting. Although that does give us a super epic moment from the Randy lookalike lice.
I can't! Hang on! You have to! For the baby! Ellie! No!
Ah, that is too good, man. Too good by half. Now, admittedly, when you have an A story as energetic and violent as this, juxtaposing it against a boring character like Clyde does make sense, as the contrast is so stark that it becomes very funny, but I do feel that this was to Clyde's detriment. I feel that this episode cemented him as like a boring guy, one with so little going on that he kind of sucks the energy out of everything around him, and not in a fun way like how Craig does. They have since tried to make him more of a thing, like when his mom died because he didn't put the toilet seat down, but I don't know, nothing about him has ever risen up to where everyone else is operating. Even that mom dying thing is more about his mom being more exciting and interesting than he is, meaning that my attention just sort of like fades away whenever he's on screen. I don't care about Clyde at all. At best, he's a Cartman substitute, being the second fattest kid in the SKU, but that means that he's only marginally interesting when someone far better isn't around. As a matter of fact, screw Clyde, that Patox part of this video is over. We ain't gonna bring him up again, not when we have our amazing Lice dad to focus on.
Son of a bitch! You had a chance to stop this! So help me, if we live through this, I'm gonna see you rot in prison.
Actually, the real guy that I wanted to talk about is the Vice President character, who reminds me so much of the old man bad guy in Train to Busan, both being that breed of self-serving jerk who is like, oh, scheming to undermine the lead guy, while a much bigger disaster is going on. If you want to know how to quickly sketch out a super detestable and effective bad guy, make them someone who puts petty personal issues above problems that are like negatively affecting another group of people, especially if they're also being affected by the problem too, because it's like, whoa, 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 you're putting all these like stupid personal issues in front of all this? You're crazy! The Walking Dead made that their central method of telling stories for over a decade, so you don't just have to take my word for it that it's very effective. Or if you don't want to put in all the work doing that kind of stuff, then just have your villains stroke a gun while muttering to themselves.
Come on if you're coming, Mr. Vice President. Yeah, right behind you.
Yes, that's right. America is so well armed that even our lice have itty-bitty Berettas on hand.
Actually, that's a Glock, not a Beretta. This is why you're a bad reviewer, because you allow alliterative wordplay to get in the way of hard facts. I know how to do your job better than you do, even though the only videos on my channel are Overwatch highlights from 5 years ago with 12 views.
Whew, sorry about that. All this talk of people getting brutally melted got my mind a-wandering. Back on topic, the Train to Busan bad guy shoots the unfortunately smashable redheaded lice lady in the head, kneecaps Hope's daddy, and even goes so far as to shoot a certain someone in the dome.
If the world was alive, it would feel this.
Ow.
You know, watching him get flung into the air reminds me of the ending of Osmosis Jones of all things, spoiler alert, where we also get to see someone being horrifically liquidized. Man, I gotta wrap this video up soon. I'm getting a hankering for ice cream for some reason. Engagement bait time. Which place has the better ice cream, Cold Stone or Dairy Queen? Look in the description of the video to see my selection. Anyway, with the villain thrown away like a carton of disgusting orange sherbet that's been forgotten in the back of your fridge for months, our hero is left to sizzle in the sun like a tragically forgotten cup of moose tracks. But then, like manna from heaven, a giant fly descends from on high, granting us the same kind of joyous relief one gets from piercing the skin on a semi-frozen cherry buried in a scoop of vanilla. The hideous beast then root beer floats him to a prosperous new land, one with cybernetic homes built atop a certain rocky road.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Angelina Jolie!
Hello, everyone.
Alright, that's an okay kind of ending, but I feel like they should have chosen someone a bit more surprising to do this bit with. Personally, I would have gone with Kurt Russell's beard, if only to strengthen the thematic connection to The Thing. But hey, at least we got to see this dummy thick version of Angelina Jolie, who is significantly heavier than she ever was in real life, so if they're trying to make her look gross, then they failed entirely, because that is literally the hottest body type in the world if you ask me. God bless ice cream for helping make girls look like that, whew. Anyway, before we go, let's answer the central question of this video: is Licecapade stupid or brilliant? Well, for my money, I think it's a story with a lot of missed potential, where there's so many fun elements that work together well enough on their own, but definitely could have been refined and lifted up into being something truly great. I get that South Park works very fast and that these episodes are made very quickly, and that there is a risk of overcomplicating a story or overstaying your welcome, the way that many people feel about the Tegrity Farms stuff. It's just, I don't know, the only scene that really comes alive and hits its truest potential is the Shampoo Massacre, which I suppose is an energy level that would be pretty difficult to maintain throughout. Even the Thing blood test part is held back by Kyle's meta discussion stuff, where we're not being actually asked to engage with the material on its face. Instead, it's all just a reference that bridges us to another part of the Clyde dilemma, that being whether he's going to allow Kenny to be scapegoated to save his own butt. The true big misstep here is how they mistakenly gave the flaccid Clyde so much room and opportunity to shine, instead of leaning into a more ensemble piece where all of them could have gotten smaller moments of gold. They had the key to a perfect story with the Thing set up, but didn't capitalize on it enough, instead going all in on the Clyde dilemma and the Mrs. Garrison reveal that they all had lice, which I guess still could have worked with the Thing setup, up, and I don't know, this is just sort of a serviceable enough conclusion. It ended, so what? Then again, Clyde doesn't actually do anything courageous himself, meaning that this whole arc of him like trying to come to terms with his condition, and what's he gonna do? Oh my gosh, is he gonna tell the truth or not? It doesn't have a meaningful payoff at all. He just tries to like bide his time until Mrs. Garrison comes around and makes the decision for him and puts a stop to them humiliating Kenny. It's actually Kyle who finally says enough is enough and confesses that he had Lice the entire time, demonstrating that he has a firmer sense of right and wrong than anybody else there, which is why he gets to be a main character while all Clyde gets to do is languish in the background doing nothing for much of the series. It does make me wonder why we were forced to spend so much time with Clyde if he wasn't going to do anything that would show him growing as a person, but I suppose that trying to break the mold by telling a story like this in such an unconventional way, where the protagonist fails to meet our expectations, was an experiment worth making. If I was going to be brutally honest with you, I would say that the Clyde stuff in this episode serves as a very important reminder that breaking the rules of traditional narrative structures and audience anticipations doesn't always pay off for you, even if you're a good writer, and that going with more usual character growth arcs is sometimes the wiser course of action. It takes a really smart writer to know when to break the rules, but it takes a great writer to make a bad decision, learn from your mistakes, and keep moving forward. But despite these flaws, I wouldn't say that this episode is like stupid or anything, or deserves any hate. Heck, I actually think it's an above average story for South Park in general, but it does make me want to get in there and do some creative editing, making me feel like a craftsman looking at a wobbly table or a US military officer seeing a bunch of Iranian schoolchildren being alive. So yeah, it's a pretty good watch overall, despite a few gurgling hiccups. But before I go running off for my precious ice cream, we can now say that this episode of South Park titled Licecapades has indeed been reviewed to death. With that said, I do want to thank Hazel and Andrew M for being $20 Patreons who have never had lice in their damn lives because they would never be caught slipping by the louse community. They're just built different, son! This kind of content wouldn't be possible without their support and the financing of folks like Undermine Crimp, Dominic O, Obsidian Moonfox, Marsha B, Valerie Vomit, and Mr. Seagull 16, all of whom help me out much more than they know. And of course, another big thank you has to go out to my $5 Patreons and YouTube channel members who got access to this video a week early. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next South Park review.
Ectoplasm! Did you see the ghost? It ran through here and slimed me!